Imagine finding out that your own brother took $3,000 of your money. Money you saved for urgent home repairs and used it to buy dad a luxury watch, all while pretending he earned it himself. Crazy, right? I felt completely blindsided, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. But instead of screaming or confronting him immediately, I started planning. A plan to expose him, to reveal the truth, and to make sure he couldn't get away with it. Stick around, because the story gets wild, and you won't believe what happens next. The nausea hit me first, before my brain even had a chance to process what was happening. It wasn't the flu. No, it was something sharper. A twisting in my stomach that felt like betrayal had taken physical form. I was standing in the middle of my office, my sanctuary, the place where everything had a place, where every number, every file, every envelope had a purpose. And suddenly, it looked like a hurricane had touched down specifically on my mahogany desk. Drawers were pulled out, some hanging precariously. Files scattered across the floor in a chaotic sea of manila and white paper. I knelt, my hands trembling, lifting my leather-bound planner for what felt like the fourth time, hoping, praying even, that the thick white envelope I knew should be there would magically appear. But it didn't. No, it couldn't be. My lips barely moved as I whispered, "No. No, no, no." I tried to force the memory into place. Tuesday morning. I'd been at the bank. Mrs. Gable wearing her festive reindeer brooch. I could still feel the crisp bills sliding into the envelope. 3 stacks of $100 bills. I had put it carefully into my purse, driven home, walked into this office, unlocked the bottom drawer, the false bottom I kept for petty cash, and placed it there. I knew I did. I knew it like I knew my own name. And yet, the drawer was empty. My knees hit the carpet, rough against my palms, and for a moment, I felt the world tilt. $3,000. To some people, maybe a vacation. To me, it was the difference between a safe floor and a gaping hole in my living room. But it was more than the money. It was violation. It wasn't a robbery in the conventional sense. There were no broken locks, no alarm blaring, no forced entry. The door was locked tight. My mind raced. Did I move it? Did I hide it somewhere stupid while sick? Did I sleepwalk? The options twisted around in my head like a nightmare carousel. And then a flicker. A shadow at the edge of my consciousness. Julian. My brother. He had come by yesterday afternoon unannounced, claiming he wanted to check on me because I was under the weather. I'd been wrapped in a duvet on the sofa, drifting in and out of a feverish nap. I remembered him making tea, wandering toward the guest bathroom down the hall. My office, of course, was right next to it. I shook my head, physically trying to dislodge the thought. No, Julian. He was vain, irresponsible, currently between opportunities. Sure, but a thief, my brother. The one I'd shared cereal bowls with, fought over remotes with, the one who might annoy the hell out of me, but who wouldn't steal $3,000 while I was sick. My voice sounded thin, almost alien as I muttered aloud. You're being paranoid, Alina. You misplaced it. You're sick, stressed. You put it somewhere stupid. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically, even as my body refused to calm. I ran the scenario again in my head. Tuesday, bank withdrawal, envelope, office, drawer, empty. No, it couldn't be a coincidence. My gaze flicked around the office. Files I'd meticulously labeled were jumbled. Stacks of paper, normally precise and neat, now looked like casualties of chaos. My hands continued to shake, the kind of trembling that made me drop the planner twice before I managed to lift it again. I replayed the memory in my mind, trying to force certainty, grasping at a sense of order in a suddenly chaotic world. I could see at Mrs. Gable's patient smile, the crisp feel of the bills. Sliding into the envelope, tucking it carefully inside my purse. I had done everything right. And yet here I was, staring at an empty drawer. Panic clawed higher, my heartbeat thundering against my ribs, echoing in the hollow spaces of my chest. Where is it, I asked myself, over and over. My eyes darted to every nook, every cranny of the office, the shadows under the desk, behind stacks of paper. I sank to the floor, dragging my hands through the scattered files, feeling them slip between my fingers like water. No. It had to be here. It had to be. I knew I put it here. I had been so careful. And yet, nothing. My mind refused to accept it. Maybe I had been sick, maybe feverish, maybe I had hidden it somewhere else. I crawled to the other side of the room, checked the safe, even though I never used it for cash. Nothing. Every drawer, every folder, every conceivable hiding spot turned up empty. I felt lightheaded, the edges of my vision blurring as acidic panic settled deeper into my gut. This was no mistake, no coincidence. Someone had taken it. The thought made my pulse spike, and yet I tried to reject it. Julian, no. He couldn't have, but the memory was there, a faint flicker at the edges of my mind. Yesterday, he'd been in the house, moving freely, claiming he was checking on me. He'd wandered past the office. Was it possible he had noticed the drawer? My chest tightened, the air sharp against my lungs. Could he really have done this? My brother? A thief? No. 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 But the timeline matched. Tuesday morning, cash withdrawn. Tuesday afternoon, Julian visiting by Wednesday. The money missing. The pattern. The probability. It was hard to ignore. I sank back against the edge of my desk, staring at the floor, trying to reconcile the person I knew with the person this implied. He wasn't just careless or irresponsible. If he had taken it, he had planned, executed, and hoped no one would notice. My hands continued to tremble. I lifted the planner one more time, checking beneath it as though sheer will could summon the envelope into existence. Nothing. I ran through the morning in painstaking detail, the way I had handled the bills, the precision with which I had stashed them. Every step accounted for. Nothing. And then my eyes caught the faint outline of an indentation on the false bottom of the drawer. A mark I hadn't noticed before. My stomach dropped. Someone had tampered with it. Someone who knew what they were looking for. Julian. The name came unbidden, almost reluctantly. The idea of accusing him felt like stabbing myself in the chest. And yet, the evidence, circumstantial though it was, had a clarity that made the panic harder to ignore. I tried to calm myself, breathing in shallow, rapid bursts. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it had fallen behind the drawer. Maybe I had left it in my bag after all. But the rational part of my mind, the forensic accountant, the part trained to notice patterns, trace funds, identify anomalies, kept returning to the same conclusion. Julian had been in the house. He had the opportunity, and the envelope had disappeared. My pulse spiked again. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. The thought of doing so while I was this frazzled, this sick, this panicked would only make me look irrational. I needed control. I needed a plan. But first, I had to sit with the truth, raw and cold, and feel it, acknowledge it. Betrayal isn't just an emotion, it's physical. My stomach was hollow, my hands shaking, my skin hot and clammy. The thought that someone I trusted, someone I had grown up with, someone who had been my sibling, might have stolen from me, gnawed at me like a living thing. And then, as I sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my office, the first spark of strategy ignited. If Julian had taken it, he had left traces, small signs of his intrusion. The planner was moved, the papers disturbed, the drawer had been tampered with. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten who I was. The forensic accountant, the one who traced missing funds through shell companies and offshore accounts. The one who made sense of chaos he had just handed me the map to find him. My chest tightened again, not with panic this time, but with focus. I would find out exactly what he had done, and not just the theft of the $3,000, but why, how, and what he was planning next. Because now I knew if Julian could take this, he could take more. And if he was clever, he would think he'd gotten away with it. But he didn't know me. He didn't know how I worked. My stomach settled slightly, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I would retrace every step, check every detail, and reconstruct the sequence of events. And as I sat there, hands still trembling but mind sharpening, the first suspicion crystallized fully. Julian, my brother, the one I had trusted blindly, and somehow, against everything I believed, he had stolen from me. The drive to my parents' house felt surreal, a blur of Christmas lights streaking past like fractured memories. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went white. My thoughts looping endlessly around the missing $3,000. $3,000. The number echoed in my head. A cursed refrain. I tried to calm myself, reminding my racing mind that I had a plan, a method, but it barely cut through the thick fog of anxiety wrapping around my chest. Pulling into the driveway, the house glowed warmly. The wreaths on every window, smoke curling gently from the chimney, and yet I felt nothing but dread. How could Julian have the audacity to turn my panic into a performance for our parents? I walked inside, shaking off snow from my boots, the smell of rosemary and garlic hitting me instantly. Mom was in the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her smile warm and unsuspecting. Dad sat in the living room, scotch in hand, looking relaxed, the very picture of contentment. And there he was, Julian, leaning against the fireplace mantel like he owned the place. One arm cocked as if for a portrait, a sharp navy suit hugging his frame perfectly. His posture screamed rehearsed confidence, the kind you fake when you know you've pulled one over on everyone. My stomach churned. I barely recognized him as my brother. He was polished, arrogant, almost theatrical in the glow of the fireplace. I scanned the rest of him, the shoes, the fabric, the subtle gleam of wealth, and then my gaze landed on the real killer, the watch. Dad's wrist now bore a vintage-inspired Tag Heuer chronograph with a blue dial, the exact model Dad had admired 3 months ago in a magazine. The numbers in my head clicked together like a lock turning in a safe. $3,000, my money, stolen, converted into a status symbol, and paraded as a gift. My lips went dry. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck, the hair standing on end. Everyone else seemed oblivious, laughing, chatting, celebrating, but I was hyper aware of every movement, every glance, every subtle flicker of guilt or the lack of it on Julian's face. My mind raced through the timeline. Tuesday, cash withdrawn. Tuesday afternoon, Julian visiting. By now, it had been transformed into this watch, sitting innocently on Dad's wrist. I wanted to scream, to grab him by the collar and demand, "What the hell did you do?" But the rational part of me, the forensic accountant, kept a tight rein on my temper. Observation first, reaction later. My father beamed at him. "The forensic genius finally descends from her ivory tower," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I forced a small, polite smile. "Hi, Dad." Mom glanced at me with concern, feeling my forehead, noting the lingering flu. I shrugged it off, muttering something about a lingering headache. Julian, meanwhile, was chattering away about crypto, the market, leveraging volatility, tossing words that sounded impressive to anyone but me. I asked about specifics. "Which exchange are you using?" And he waved me off with a chuckle. "Always the auditor." "Right. Well, don't bore Mom with the details. It's handled." Handled. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just showing off. He was scripting the narrative, controlling the room, ensuring no one could see the theft beneath the glamour of the moment. Dinner began. Roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables sat untouched on my plate as I followed Julian's performance. He gestured animatedly, laughed heartily, and every so often, my eyes flicked down to that watch, glittering under the chandelier light. I felt bile rise, but I forced myself to breathe. This was about patience, observation, and confirmation. When dessert arrived, Julian clapped his hands together. "Official business time," he declared. He pulled a small box from behind the sofa, silver wrapping glinting. My throat tightened. He walked to Dad, chest puffed with triumph, and I felt my stomach drop. The gift, the performance, the stolen money, all neatly wrapped and timed for maximum effect. Dad lifted the box, tears in his eyes, and opened it to reveal the watch. Gasps rippled around the room. Even I gasped, but for reasons completely different from everyone else. "Julian, this is incredible," Dad whispered. My heart hammered in my chest. The room was alive with applause, admiration, awe, and I was trapped in the eye of a storm that was entirely orchestrated by the person I had trusted most. I asked, my voice barely audible over the chatter. "How much?" Silence fell like a guillotine. Julian's smile faltered. The first crack. "It wasn't cheap, sis, but quality never is," he said casually. The world tilted. $3,000. My money. The exact amount missing from my drawer. The envelope I had meticulously placed and had now vanished, converted into a gleaming object of parental adoration. My mind raced through calculations and timelines, the forensic part of me assessing, weighing, mapping every move, every decision. He had entered my home while I was ill, located the drawer, removed every single bill. He had weaponized affection, buying admiration and loyalty. And I realized with a cold precision that this had been deliberate. Not impulsive, not careless. Deliberate. My parents were beaming, Mom wiping tears from her face, Dad admiring the craftsmanship, and Julian was basking in it all. I sat frozen, the words trapped somewhere between my chest and my lips. I forced a smile, a ghost of one that didn't reach my eyes. "Wow," I said softly. "That is truly remarkable. Julian, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done physically. I wanted to cry, I wanted to vomit, but mostly, I wanted to compute, to analyze, to understand every angle." The betrayal was sharp, acute, like a scalpel cutting through trust. But beneath the shock, a cold gear had engaged in my mind. Julian thought cash was untraceable. He thought he was clever, but he had underestimated me. He had missed one crucial element the forensic accountant doesn't forget. The observer notices. The strategist calculates. I watched him closely. Noting the smallest, tells his eyes flicking away from mine, the subtle sweat at his temples despite the cool room, his fidgeting hands, the way he constantly touched his tie or the wine glass, the pattern, the timeline, the conversion of cash into a watch, all pointed to meticulous planning, a coordinated effort, and the worst part, he had wrapped it in silver paper to guarantee parental defense if I ever confronted him. He had thought about every angle except me. The heat of rage rose in my chest, mixed with disbelief. Every smile, every congratulatory clap, every word of praise from my parents felt like an insult, a layer of manipulation laid over my pain. Julian was not just flaunting a watch. He was flaunting my loss, my violation, my panic. And he was doing it in front of the entire family, ensuring I appeared petty or jealous if I reacted. I had to remain composed. I had to maintain control. I sipped my water, letting it slide down my throat as if to wash away the bile, as I observed the social dynamics, the subtle ways Julian manipulated attention and perception. Every anecdote, every laugh, every piece of bravado was calculated. I counted the time between his gestures, mapped the probable thought patterns, and confirmed what I had suspected: this was theft, weaponized through performance and designed to create the exact reaction I was suppressing. Then, Vanessa entered the picture more clearly in my mind, the instigator, the influence, the one feeding his hunger for validation. I saw it in the glances, the agreement to every over-the-top claim, the encouragement of gestures meant to impress. She was steering him, amplifying the theft into a theatrical moment. And I, silent, trapped, had to play along while absorbing every detail. My heart pounded as I reconstructed the timeline in my head. Cash withdrawn, Tuesday morning. Julian's visit, Tuesday afternoon. Watch presented Thursday night. 2 days. Every single bill gone. Immediate conversion to a luxury item. Intentional, audacious, strategic. My pulse steadied slightly. Not with relief, but with clarity. I understood. He had thought he had executed the perfect theft, but he hadn't accounted for my observation, my knowledge, my analytical mind. Each smile he offered, each story he told, each dismissive gesture now became a data point, a piece of the puzzle I would use to dismantle his deception. The cost of the watch, the precise amount missing from my drawer, the admiration and applause from my parents, all aligned like evidence in a case I had been training for my entire life. I kept my expression neutral, a mask of politeness and festive engagement, while internally my mind was calculating the steps to expose the theft fully, while keeping control of the narrative. I noted every micro-expression, every slight hesitation, every verbal slip, each one a breadcrumb leading to the truth. The cold logic was now in control. The emotional shock remained, but it was harnessed, directed toward understanding, toward planning, toward the inevitable confrontation. I replayed the conversation in my head. Brokerage, please. I'm thinking bigger than a 9 to 5. Crypto plays are paying off. He had laughed, had waved away questions, had assumed competence where there was none, and he had done it in front of witnesses, masking theft as brilliance. My jaw clenched slightly, but outwardly, I remained calm. This was about strategy, not confrontation, not yet. The revelation of the cost of the watch, the exact $3,000, the direct link to the money taken from me, solidified the scenario. My heart still thumped, my stomach still churned, but the panic had been replaced with precise calculation. I would reconstruct everything: timeline, receipts, conversations, and the behaviors observed. Each of these would form a coherent case. Julian had underestimated me. He had been reckless, audacious, arrogant, and entirely predictable in his improvisation. And now, in the warm, glowing room filled with Christmas lights, roast beef, and family cheer, I knew exactly what he had done, why, and how he thought he had gotten away with it. He had taken my money, converted it into a gift, manipulated perception, and weaponized familial love to shield himself from suspicion. And yet, he had forgotten one critical factor I was watching, analyzing, remembering, calculating. The betrayal, the shock, the anger, the disbelief, they were all raw, but they were now components of a larger picture. Julian had made the mistake of assuming I would react emotionally rather than rationally, that I would be distracted by my illness rather than applying methodical scrutiny. And in that assumption, he had handed me everything I needed. The cold logic of realization spread through me like ice water. I understood fully the audacity, the plan, the manipulation, and the exact steps I would take next. And all the while, the dinner continued. The applause for him never ceasing. The family unaware of the inner storm I was containing. The realization hit me harder than any sickness ever could he had stolen from me deliberately. He had planned the presentation. He had anticipated reactions. And he had weaponized love itself as armor against exposure. And in that moment, I knew the game had changed. I was no longer just the sister, the observer, the bystander. I was calculating, strategizing, planning the inevitable reckoning. And Julian, for all his performance, had no idea the scope of the storm he had invited into his own living room. Watching Julian with Vanessa was like observing a wildfire being fanned. Every subtle glance, every agreement, every nod she gave seemed carefully calibrated to push him further, to make him bolder than he would be on his own. I noticed it in the small things first, the way she leaned in when he talked, the way her hand briefly touched his arm, almost guiding him. Not physically, but with that quiet, persuasive influence that whispered, "Do it. Take the risk. Show the world you've arrived." I felt a chill because suddenly, the theft of the $3,000 wasn't just a moment of sibling recklessness. It was strategy, performance, orchestrated. Vanessa wasn't a passive bystander. She was steering the ship. Every action Julian took now seemed less his own and more a reflection of her ambitions. I remembered the brief conversation I overheard when the tap was running, how her tone shifted from soft to insistent, and I pieced together the picture. She wasn't just encouraging, she was directing. She wanted him to spend, to signal, and to display, to impress, to climb, and it all came at the expense of my money, our family trust, our parents' sense of security. I watched as she casually mentioned potential investments, suggesting high-risk opportunities, all while Julian nodded, eager to please, eager to look successful, eager to play the role she scripted. And then the details fell into place. The words she used: velocity of capital, projecting abundance. Stepping into his power, they weren't casual. They were tactics. High-level manipulation designed to teach Julian to risk, to leverage, to spend, and crucially, to believe he was the mastermind. My pulse accelerated as I realized the audacity. She had found the weak points, the insecurities, and she was exploiting them, shaping Julian into a vehicle for her ambitions. But the money, my money, was the fuel. And the more I observed, the clearer it became that this was not a one-time theft. This was escalation. She was grooming him, conditioning him to chase bigger stakes, to look for sources of cash, to convert them into status symbols that would impress her. And Julian, oblivious to the morality, consumed every word, every suggestion, every push like an addict chasing a high. I began to dig, mentally reconstructing every visit, every dinner, every conversation, and my investigative instincts kicked in. Vanessa. Who was she really? Why this obsession with status, with wealth? Signaling, I traced her connections, her history, and the picture became grimly detailed. She wasn't just a socialite or image consultant. She had a record, a criminal history, debts, and affiliations with high-stakes financial schemes, identity fraud, bad checks, lawsuits. She'd exploited others before, and now she'd found a new mark. Julian was naive, eager, trusting, and entirely manipulable. And she was feeding him the narrative that wealth and risk were the path to validation. The threads began to converge in my mind: the $3,000 theft, the luxury watch, Julian's reckless confidence, Vanessa's subtle orchestration. The theft was a symptom, not the root. Vanessa was the root, and Julian was the branch, bending and breaking under her guidance. I could see it in the way he deferred to her, the way he sought approval for every assertion, the way he hesitated or blushed when challenged by her. She was the hidden force, the one pulling strings, escalating the stakes. And the implications were chilling. This wasn't just a family problem. This wasn't just a sibling dispute. This was a calculated, ongoing pattern, and if left unchecked, it could extend beyond my $3,000. I felt the familiar cold calculation settling in the same clarity that had guided me in forensic accounting. Tracing missing funds, tracking patterns, identifying manipulators. Vanessa's criminal history was not vague. It was documented. Multiple fraud cases, credit disputes, marital entanglements with men involved in insurance scams. The pieces aligned perfectly: her past, her modus operandi, Julian's desperation for approval, and the recent theft. I understood fully for the first time the gravity of the situation. She had not only influenced him to steal my money, she had escalated his behavior, setting him on a path that could endanger our parents' finances, their trust, their safety. Every observation, every overheard conversation, every subtle interaction added to the dossier forming in my mind. Her words weren't mere advice, they were instructions. Instructions meant to push Julian into taking risks he would never take alone. And he complied, not out of malice, but out of a desire to impress, to belong, to perform the role she defined. The more I connected the dots, the more sinister the picture became. This was not impulsive. This was a blueprint. And Julian, blinded by trust and admiration, was executing it meticulously. My hands went cold as I realized that the theft of the $3,000 was a mere trial run, a test of his willingness to risk, and to present a fabricated reality to our parents. Vanessa had orchestrated it to see how far he would go, to gauge the malleability of his ethics, and to manipulate the flow of money and influence in her favor. I pictured the chain of events: Julian entering the house while I was ill, discovering the envelope, converting cash into a watch that would generate applause, controlling the narrative so that any suspicion would reflect badly on me rather than him. And Vanessa, subtly reinforcing each choice, each action, whispering approval and strategic advice, ensuring he saw this as a clever move rather than theft. My stomach twisted, a mix of anger and strategic focus. I wasn't shocked by his greed. I was analyzing the mechanism, the structure of influence. Vanessa was the engine, Julian the vehicle, and my money, my parents' perception, the family's trust, they were the fuel. My mind ran through every pattern, every known tactic of financial manipulation, overlaying it onto the behaviors I had observed. The conversations, the glances, the subtle encouragements, they all matched known behavioral profiles for exploitative influence. She had studied him, learned his weaknesses, and was actively directing him. The audacity of it made my jaw tighten. She wasn't just causing harm, she was orchestrating it, pushing Julian into increasingly risky and unethical behaviors. And the more I realized, the more I understood the scope. This was bigger than a sibling squabble. She had a history, debts, and high-stakes schemes that required cash flow from gullible, ambitious men like Julian. My mind mapped the risk trajectory if left unchecked. His next moves could be catastrophic, potentially endangering our parents' finances and exposing him to legal repercussions. I replayed their interactions over the past week, noticing subtle patterns I had dismissed at first. The suggestions about restaurants he couldn't afford, investments with improbable returns, small gifts meant to impress and signal status, all nudges, all part of a carefully designed manipulation. And the watch, the $3,000 stolen from me, it was a proof of concept, a tangible demonstration of the system working. Julian had passed the test, and Vanessa was already moving to the next level, pushing him toward more ambitious financial risks. I sat back, letting the information settle, the tension coiling in my chest. This wasn't just a family crisis, it was a calculated manipulation, a scenario where someone external had infiltrated our family dynamics and was steering the actions of someone I had trusted, someone with access, someone with the capacity to cause real harm. My analytical mind kicked into overdrive, cataloging the known facts: Vanessa's criminal record, her debts, her marital connections to convicted fraudsters, her patterns of exploitation, Julian's susceptibility, the sequence of theft, the manipulation of appearances, and the conversion of cash into status symbols. Everything pointed to a single conclusion. This was a deliberate, escalating campaign, and the stakes weren't small. Julian had taken $3,000 today, but tomorrow, Vanessa would push him further. She wanted larger sums, riskier maneuvers, and each success reinforced the pattern. Each applause validated the deception. I realized with cold clarity that the problem wasn't just Julian. It was Vanessa. She was the driver, the architect of the plan, the one escalating risk and controlling the narrative. Julian was complicit, but largely blind to the orchestration, acting under the influence of someone who understood leverage, perception, and financial manipulation far better than he did. My thoughts shifted to prevention, to containment. The first step was understanding completely who she was, what her capabilities were, and how she manipulated those around her. The second was assessing Julian's weaknesses and predicting his next moves. The third, and most critical, was gathering evidence to expose the influence before it escalated further. I recalled the text messages I had seen, the subtle hints dropped during conversations, and the indirect observations, her hands on his arm, her eyes assessing, her comments about lifestyle, status, and signaling. Each detail became a piece of a puzzle revealing intent and influence. The psychological pattern was clear. She isolated Julian emotionally, encouraged risk-taking financially, and offered validation in exchange for compliance, pushing him to compromise morals and relationships. I let my mind trace the trajectory forward. Vanessa wanted more than Julian's compliance. She wanted resources. The $3,000 theft was just the beginning. The patterns suggested escalation from small thefts to leveraging family assets, to manipulating him into taking increasingly dangerous risks. I could see the method groom the susceptible, encourage risky behavior, monitor compliance, reward obedience, escalate stakes. And Julian, blinded by admiration and desire to impress, was the perfect subject. My pulse quickened not with fear but with clarity. I knew the mechanism. I understood the psychology, and I had observed the financial footprint. Each subtle gesture, each whispered encouragement, each approving nod from Vanessa was now cataloged in my mind as part of an investigative record. I could predict the trajectory, anticipate the next theft, and prepare for the confrontation necessary to protect my family. This wasn't impulsive sibling misbehavior. This was manipulation, grooming, and financial exploitation. And I finally had the map to dismantle it. Once I returned home from the family dinner, the house was dark and silent, but I didn't feel the panic I had hours ago. Instead, there was a sharp clarity, like the eye of a storm. I walked straight to my office, stepping over the scattered papers I hadn't had the time or the patience to organize. The mess didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the trail, the evidence, the patterns, the puzzle pieces that Julian and Vanessa had left behind. I sat down at my desk, the blue glow of the monitors illuminating my hands as I pulled a fresh notepad from the drawer. At the top, I wrote in bold letters, "Subject Julian." Every letter felt like the click of a key turning a lock. The first step was to confirm the theft and map out the sequence of events. I opened the Cloud Sync dashboard and quickly located Julian's MacBook Pro, still signed into my old laptop's backup. His last sync had been just 2 hours ago, leaving a footprint of activity I could track with precision. My knuckles cracked audibly in the silence as I whispered to the empty room, "Let's see where you've been shopping, little brother." The downloads folder yielded the first concrete evidence, a PDF titled "Lease Agreement," downloaded yesterday morning. I opened it carefully. scanning the numbers, the property details, the financial requirements. A 2-bedroom apartment, rent at $4,500 a month. Security deposit, $9,000. I froze for a moment, letting it sink in. The $3,000 he had taken from me bought him part of the watch, maybe even a small portion of the deposits. My pulse ticked up, but my hands remained steady. This was the moment where observation became strategy. I documented everything meticulously, taking screenshots, noting dates and times, filing them by category, and cross-referencing against my own records. Next, I checked the Photos app. There, it was a bathroom mirror selfie. Julian holding a fanned stack of $100 bills. My $100 bills. Metadata confirmed the time and date. The caption read, "Secured the bag. Daddy's going to love his gift." I couldn't help a tight, sharp laugh. It was audacious. He had mocked me to the salesperson, unaware that I could trace every action. Screenshot taken, saved to 3 external drives. Redundancy was key. Nothing could slip through. Then came messages. Julian had been using my old laptop, still synced to my cloud account. iMessages poured in, a trove of interactions with Vanessa, innocuous at first glance, but laden with implication. Every line, every timestamp, every linguistic quirk was a thread to unravel. Vanessa instructing him to deposit, to manage the transaction, to move funds, her tone shifting seamlessly from seductive to aggressive, depending on the urgency. Each line reinforced the pattern I had observed earlier she was orchestrating. He was complying, and the theft was only the beginning. I paused, letting the information settle. Then I turned to Marco Lewis, Vanessa's husband. The file Garrison had sent over was concise but damning. Marco's insights confirmed everything. Vanessa had a history of passing bad checks, fraud charges, and manipulating men into providing cash or access. She was deep in debt, desperately needing liquidity to settle old scores. And Julian was now the vector, a conduit to satisfy her immediate financial needs. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the cold precision of strategy settle over me. This wasn't just a theft. This was an operation, and I was in control. Next came the estate documents, the real leverage. Julian was planning to push for access to the trust, to manipulate Mom into signing papers that would grant him authority to liquidate accounts. I opened the estate planning software, pulling up the Reynolds family trust file. He wanted access, and I would give him the illusion of it, but with a trap hidden inside. I began drafting a document, carefully, meticulously. At first glance, it looked official crests, watermarks, legalese, the title, authorization of asset liquidation and trustee transfer. But buried deep in paragraph 14, subsection C, was the mechanism clause, stating that by signing, the beneficiary acknowledged receipt of prior gifts as loans and agreed that any unauthorized withdrawal would trigger immediate confession of fraud and forfeiture of future inheritance. A legal bear trap. I smiled faintly, satisfaction spreading through my chest. Julian thought he was clever. He had no idea how methodical I was. The trap wasn't just about legality. It was about psychological leverage, about ensuring that when he acted, he exposed himself completely. I set the document aside, ready for the final phase baiting him. I sent him a carefully worded text, casual, conversational, almost apologetic, hinting at an account Mom and Dad hadn't utilized. suggesting he could give advice, get involved. The response was immediate gratitude, eagerness, obliviousness. Perfect. He had taken it. He was walking into my design, completely unaware. I spent the next 6 hours compiling the dossier receipts, screenshots, messages, the lease agreement, Marco's notes, and the text exchanges. Every item was cataloged, time-stamped, cross-referenced. The weight of it was immense, but it wasn't stressful. It was precision work, observation, analysis, execution. This was where the forensic accountant and the strategist converged. Then came verification. The jeweler, Julian, had purchased the watch, and I needed confirmation. I called, claiming to be Alina Reynolds, explaining the situation about the missing receipt. The email came within minutes. Tag Heuer Monaco, cash payment, gift wrap requested, purchased with winnings from a sister's charity. He had literally bragged about stealing from me while buying the watch. Cold, audacious, reckless. I saved the email, filed it meticulously alongside the others. Each piece of evidence added clarity, context, and leverage. This wasn't just theft anymore. It was fraud, manipulation, and escalating criminal intent. I ran through every scenario, considering what Julian would do on Christmas Eve, how Vanessa would influence him, and how the documents might be used. I adjusted variables in my mental model: timing, location, psychological triggers. By the end of the night, the trap was fully laid, every piece of evidence secured, every angle considered, every potential countermeasure anticipated. I sat back, feeling a calm satisfaction that only comes from complete preparation. The storm outside the blizzard, the snow, the darkness mirrored the controlled chaos I had orchestrated inside my mind. Julian thought he was clever. Vanessa thought she was pulling the strings. And yet, every move had been catalogued, analyzed, and accounted for. I allowed myself a brief smirk. The forensic accountant had clocked in. Observation and logic would guide the next steps. The documents were ready, the evidence secured, and the psychological framework for confrontation fully in place. Each piece fit together like a complex puzzle, the culmination of strategy, analysis, and precise timing. I felt a sense of control, a sense of inevitability. Julian and Vanessa were walking into a scenario they didn't fully understand, and I held the key. And the satisfaction was sharp, cold, and meticulous. The only way I knew how to feel it. Every screen, every folder, every note, every printout, every screenshot, the trail was irrefutable. The map of their actions and intentions crystal clear. I took a final moment to review everything, running through the events, confirming timelines, ensuring every fact aligned with evidence. Tuesday morning, cash withdrawn. Tuesday afternoon, Julian visited, watch purchased, messages exchanged, lease signed, intent clear. Vanessa's manipulation documented, Marco's insights verified, trap drafted, legal safeguards in place. The scenario was airtight. The cold, mechanical clarity of the plan settled in me like ice. This wasn't about emotion. This wasn't about retaliation. It was about methodical exposure, calculated, precise, and unassailable. And yet, beneath the satisfaction, there was a simmering thrill, the anticipation of the confrontation, the unveiling, the revelation. Julian and Vanessa had orchestrated audacity. I had orchestrated precision. The next move, when executed, would be unavoidable and irreversible. I finally leaned back, the hum of the monitors, and the quiet of the night around me, and allowed myself the smallest controlled exhale. The plan was in motion, evidence secured, traps laid, the stage set. And for the first time in days, I felt the rush of control, the thrill of clarity, the satisfaction of methodical justice taking shape before it had even begun. Christmas Eve arrived with a sun so bright it made the freshly fallen snow almost blinding. The house smelled like pine, roasting ham, and cinnamon, the typical festive warmth amplified by the laughter and chatter of family gathering for the holiday. I walked in deliberately, black folder tucked under my arm, dressed sharply, commanding presence without saying a word. Heads turned, Julian's eyes flickered, the first crack in his practiced composure, Vanessa standing beside him in her gold dress. Straightened instantly, the faintest ripple of apprehension crossing her expression. I made my way to the center of the living room, where Julian had been holding court, talking animatedly about his new venture, a firm he claimed would launch once funding was secured. The music, the chatter, all seemed to fade, and I felt the weight of every gaze settling on me as I set the folder down on the coffee table with a firm thud. "What's that?" Dad asked, his brows knitting together, surprise and curiosity in equal measure. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch for just a heartbeat longer than comfortable. "Julian," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is the invoice for your lifestyle." Julian paled slightly, caught mid-gesture, one hand frozen in mid-air. I slid the folder toward him, lifting the top sheet. Photographs. The first one was the bathroom mirror selfie, the fan of $100 bills, time-stamped, captioned, "Secured the bag. Daddy's going to love his gift." The room went silent. Even Vanessa's smile faltered. I held my gaze, unwavering, letting the evidence speak first. "This," I continued, flipping to the next page, "is the receipt for the Tag Heuer Monaco you purchased in cash, with the note stating it was from winnings from a sister's charity." Julian's hands twitched, the first sign of panic, a slight quiver in the fingers, betraying the mask of calm. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening as she instinctively moved closer to him. I let the tension hang in the room like a live wire. "Julian, this is the money I withdrew. Tuesday morning, the $3,000 I carefully placed in my office drawer," I said, voice steady, deliberate. "You went into my home while I was sick, took it, and used it to buy this watch to impress Dad." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. My parents froze, shock etched across their faces. Julian opened his mouth, then closed it, searching for a response. I continued, flipping to the next section: text messages, lines from Vanessa, instructing him to make deposits, to transfer funds, to manage the transaction carefully, paired with Julian's replies. Compliant, desperate, seeking approval, every message another thread in the tapestry of manipulation. I let the eyes around the room drink in the correspondence. Julian shifted in place, unease spreading across his features. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle on the audience, the room heavy with expectation. "And this," I said, sliding the next sheet forward, "is a letter from Marco Lewis, Vanessa's husband, from prison. He details exactly how she has been manipulating you, Julian, and the lengths she has gone to in order to exploit your compliance and finances." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line, Julian's fingers twitched again. My tone remained calm, unshakable. You see, $3,000 wasn't just money. It was the first step, a test. And you, Julian, passed. Under her direction, yes, but you executed it nonetheless. I watched their faces, noting every flicker of expression. Parents pale, mouths slightly open, eyes wide, cousins leaning forward, absorbed. Julian's eyes darted to Vanessa, seeking reassurance, validation, perhaps a plan of escape. For the family, Vanessa murmured weakly. An attempt at justification, but her voice lacked conviction. I picked up the folder again, pulling out the lease agreement Julian had downloaded, showing the 2-bedroom apartment. $4,500 a month rent, $9,000 deposit, or maybe this, I said, letting the numbers land. The apartment you were planning to secure with funds that weren't yours, meant for mom and dad's savings. This isn't about opportunity. This is about deception and manipulation. Julian's face drained of color. Vanessa's eyes widened as the implication struck. I didn't steal it. Julian finally stammered, voice breaking slightly, panic bubbling through the cracks of his composure. I borrowed it for the watch, for Dad, for the family. The room held its collective breath. I stood slowly, stepping closer, voice dropping an octave to emphasize the weight of truth. For the family, I repeated, incredulous. You stole my money, manipulated everyone around you, and presented it as a gift to secure their praise and admiration. And you had the audacity to act surprised when it came into question. Julian's hands went to his head, fumbling. Vanessa stepped forward, trying to regain control. Helena, this is unfair, she hissed, defensive. I didn't flinch. I held her gaze, cool, precise. Is it you who instructed him, guided him, escalated the theft, and manipulated his perception of morality and obligation? The plan was yours as much as his. Gasps from the family punctuated my words. My father's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing at both of them. I moved to the text messages again, pulling out those where Vanessa had shifted her tone aggressive, insistent, even seductive to push Julian toward compliance with her schemes. Read these, I said simply. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Julian's shallow breathing. Vanessa's attempts at justification faltered under the weight of the evidence. He's a victim too, she tried weakly, looking to Julian for support. Julian shrank slightly, avoiding eye contact. My hand hovered over the folder, and I spoke with deliberate calm, letting each word land like a hammer. You both manipulated, deceived, and orchestrated this theft. You took money that didn't belong to you, and you used it to engineer perception, to control narrative, to secure applause and approval. And now, the entire family can see exactly what has happened. The reaction was palpable. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling. Dad's face hardened. Disbelief and anger mixed. Julian's shoulders slumped, the bravado gone, replaced with stark fear. Vanessa's posture stiffened, the first hint of recognition that her influence had been fully exposed. I just wanted to help, Julian whispered, voice barely audible, desperate. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze, eyes cold, unwavering. Help you stole from me. You weaponized our family's love. You acted under the direction of someone exploiting you, and yet you still executed the theft. That is not help. Julian, that is deception. That is manipulation. The room remained tense, every ear straining, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding. I turned slightly, pulling the lease agreement forward, the text screenshots, the receipts, the letter from Marco all laid bare. "And this," I said, letting the folders slide toward Dad and Mom, "is the full picture, the theft, the manipulation, the planning, and the intent, the documents, the messages, the proof of coordination. Nothing is hidden, nothing is ambiguous. This is the reality." My parents' faces reflected horror, disbelief, but clarity was slowly replacing confusion. Julian's face was pale, the reality of exposure fully sinking in. Vanessa stepped back, her confidence shattered, her influence over Julian exposed for all to see. I allowed a small pause, letting the tension settle, allowing the audience, the family, to fully absorb the implications. "So now," I continued, voice calm, deliberate, "you both have a choice. Admit what you did, accept responsibility, or face the consequences of your actions. The documents, the messages, the photographic proof, and the corroboration from Marco Lewis make the facts indisputable." Julian's lips trembled. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. Vanessa's eyes darted toward him, then to me, then back at Julian. The room was heavy with expectation, the kind of weight that makes every second stretch painfully long. "Too late for intent," I said softly. "The actions are done. The manipulation, the theft, the deceit, those are concrete. The choices you make now determine the consequences." Dad stood slowly, the weight of authority and disappointment radiating from him. "Julian," he said, voice firm, resonant, "this is not what I taught you, not what I expected. Explain yourself." Julian's voice broke. He glanced at Vanessa, who looked back with the faintest glimmer of fear. I wanted to make you proud," he stammered. "The watch, the investments. I thought it would show I was successful, that I was responsible." I interjected, calm but cutting. "You were directed, guided, and manipulated into committing theft. And your attempts to frame it as a gift for admiration only make it worse. You weaponized love to hide theft. That is your reality. Julian." The room shifted, tension mounting, family members exchanging glances, whispering, processing. Vanessa tried one last time to intervene, voice sharp, controlled. "Alina, you're being unfair. He was just trying to follow my advice." I met her gaze without blinking, cold precision in my voice. "And that advice led him to steal. That advice escalated the behavior. That advice manipulated his perception and yours. That is the truth. No one else is responsible. Not your words, not your gestures, except the actions taken and the deception executed." Julian's hands trembled. He looked at me, desperate for some form of leniency, some loophole, but the evidence was comprehensive, irrefutable. The black folder, carefully curated, documented, and organized, had made abstract suspicion tangible. I let silence fall once more, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone in the room. My parents' eyes were wide, their shock giving way to comprehension. They saw the photographs, the receipts, the messages, the letters, and the orchestration of deceit fully laid bare. Julian's composure shattered entirely. He slumped in his seat, muttering excuses that fell flat against the mountain of proof. Vanessa's posture collapsed, the arrogance stripped from her frame. I closed the folder slowly, the sound of the final page thudding against the table, a punctuation mark. "This ends now," I said, voice low, firm. You are both accountable for your actions, and the consequences will follow. The evidence is complete, irrefutable, and in your hands. There is no hiding, no deflection, no manipulation that will alter reality. I looked around the room. The atmosphere was electric, charged with tension, shock, and clarity. Julian's panic was palpable, Vanessa's defeat obvious, and my family finally was fully aware of the scope of what had been done. I allowed a deep breath, calm, measured, letting the finality of the confrontation sink in. The high-stakes reveal had been executed flawlessly. Evidence presented, truth laid bare, manipulation exposed. Julian and Vanessa were cornered, their deception undone, and control of the narrative had shifted entirely into my hands. The room was still, heavy, charged, and for the first time in days, I felt the satisfaction of precision, of strategy, of methodical justice in motion. The moment the black folder hit the coffee table, the world shifted. Julian's panic was immediate, a stark contrast to the confident and polished figure he had been earlier. He looked around, realization dawning on him like a storm breaking across the sky, and I could see him trying to reconcile the smug, in-control persona he had projected with the crushing weight of exposure. Vanessa, standing beside him, seemed to shrink under the gaze of the family and the undeniable proof laid out before them. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. My parents, shocked and tearful, stared from one to the other, the reality of their children's actions hitting them hard. I stayed calm, controlled, but inside, I felt a calculated satisfaction, the same cold, measured precision that had guided me through the evidence gathering, now flowing into the unfolding consequences. I watched as Julian's first instinct was to argue, to rationalize, but he quickly realized that there was nowhere to hide. Every screenshot, every receipt, every message, every letter, all the threads of manipulation and theft were documented and undeniable. The room was tense, the kind of tense that prickled the skin and made each breath feel measured and deliberate. Julian slumped in his chair, his defiance drained, replaced by the stark reality that he could no longer perform the role of golden child. Vanessa's shoulders sagged, the mask of superiority slipping, her carefully curated confidence collapsing under the weight of exposure. The air was thick with disbelief, relief, and anticipation, as if everyone present could feel the turning of a tide they had been unaware of until this very moment. After what felt like an eternity, the authorities were called in, quietly, efficiently. Julian complied fully, almost mechanically, each action reinforcing the inevitability of the consequences. He did not resist, nor did he argue. His voice was low, tinged with panic and resignation as he answered questions, acknowledged the theft, and recounted his manipulations with Vanessa. The level of detail he provided, under my guidance and the documentation I had prepared, made the investigation swift and conclusive. Vanessa, in the meantime, was located and arrested at a nearby motel. Her calm demeanor shattered. It was almost surreal. The speed and precision with which the authorities moved, the way her past criminal record and debts left her with no room to maneuver. The evidence I had compiled, including her letters, instructions, and documented influence over Julian, was more than enough to secure her apprehension and tie her directly to multiple fraudulent activities. Watching them being led away, The weight that had pressed on me for weeks began to lift, just slightly at first, but then more tangibly. I allowed myself to exhale, a long, slow release of breath that carried with it months of frustration, anxiety, and fear. My parents, finally, could see that the assets they had worked a lifetime to build were protected, untouched by the manipulations of someone external and someone internal. The trust documents I had revised, the clauses I had inserted, and the meticulous documentation I had maintained ensured that Julian could not access or liquidate accounts, that any attempt would immediately trigger legal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The system, my system, was airtight. In the aftermath, family reactions were a mix of relief, validation, and cautious rebuilding. Mom and Dad embraced, holding each other with a quiet intensity that spoke volumes, relief that the danger had been neutralized. Sorrow for the betrayal, gratitude for the clarity and protection. Cousins and extended family, initially shocked, began to process the events with a mix of astonishment and respect, recognizing the thoroughness of the exposure and the careful orchestration that ensured justice was done without escalation into further conflict. Julian, meanwhile, was placed under probation and required to complete community service and mandatory counseling. The theft of the $3,000 was prosecuted fully, ensuring accountability while avoiding undue familial destruction. Vanessa's arrest, in conjunction with the discovery of her broader financial schemes and the involvement of the loan shark S, removed the external threat entirely. With both the internal and external threats neutralized, the focus shifted to repairing relationships and establishing a sense of normalcy. For my parents, there was a period of quiet reflection, an acknowledgement of oversight, and a renewed understanding of the necessity for structured financial protections. I became the sole trustee of the family trust, a role I accepted not for power, but for the clarity and security it provided, ensuring that no such manipulations could occur again. The days following the exposure were punctuated by administrative follow-ups, legal confirmations, and careful discussions with the authorities. Julian's cooperation facilitated a smooth resolution, and Vanessa's apprehension closed the chapter on her predatory influence. Amid the legal and procedural details, there was space for emotional processing. Conversations with my parents became intimate, reflective, and deeply validating. My father, for the first time in years, acknowledged the imbalance in trust and oversight. "Alina," he said one evening over a quiet dinner, soup and bread, simple but grounding. "You saved us, not just the money, but us from being blind." His eyes were wet with emotion, his voice thick with gratitude and realization. Mom joined in, covering our hands with hers. "You have always been the one to protect us, the one to see clearly. We ignored that for so long, and for that, we are deeply sorry." I listened, letting the words settle, the knot in my chest loosening. The weight of responsibility and the tension of the past weeks began to dissolve, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of justice properly served. Julian's absence, while painful in terms of family dynamics, was necessary. His temporary removal from the family space allowed for healing and reflection. It was understood that re-entry, if ever, would be contingent upon significant demonstrable changes. The holiday season continued, quieter, more reflective. The decorations remained, but the energy shifted from celebration to contemplation, from distraction to focus on restored trust. I spent time with my parents, discussing financial safeguards, estate planning, and lessons learned, ensuring that knowledge and vigilance would replace naivety and blind trust. In these conversations, I found not just a reaffirmation of my skills and judgment, but also a deepened connection with my family. My role, once solely professional in the forensic sense, now had a personal, protective dimension that gave me a sense of fulfillment beyond the cold mechanics of investigation. Nights were spent in quiet reflection, the snow outside turning to soft, melting sheets of white, the house calm and secure. I would sit at my desk, reviewing the notes, receipts, and documents one last time, ensuring completeness, reflecting on the chain of events with a mixture of analytical satisfaction and emotional relief. The finality of each action, the secured evidence, Julian's accountability, Vanessa's arrest. The protection of the trust provided a grounding sense of control and clarity. Gradually, the house returned to normalcy. The mess in my office, once a symbol of panic and violation, became background noise, a reminder of what had been overcome. I sat at my desk, opened the drawer with the false bottom, now empty and innocuous, and placed a new pen beside my notepad, engraved with my initials, a gift from my father, a token of trust and acknowledgement. Each day brought incremental restoration of peace. Conversations with my parents grew lighter, reflective, and infused with humor and gratitude. The trust documents stood as silent guardians, ensuring that manipulations could not repeat. Julian, in a monitored halfway house, was confronted with the consequences of his actions in a structured, supervised manner, working at a minimum wage job, paycheck going toward restitution. Even in his absence, there was a sense of order, closure, and protection of familial stability. Family gatherings, though quieter, regained warmth. Festive dinners were now about connection, reflection, and shared history, rather than manipulation, deceit, and unspoken tension. I observed the interactions, noting the restored dynamics, the subtle but meaningful shifts in communication, trust, and mutual respect. I allowed myself moments of private reflection, considering the sequence of events, the careful orchestration of evidence gathering, the deployment of legal traps, and the ultimate exposure of Julian and Vanessa. Each step had been precise, deliberate, and necessary, and the satisfaction of seeing justice manifest without unnecessary collateral damage was profound. The sense of relief was palpable, an almost physical release as months of tension, worry, and vigilance gave way to calm. Validation came not only from the outcomes arrest, restitution, protection of assets, but also from the recognition from my parents. The acknowledgement that their trust and their family's security had been preserved. Gradually, the emotional closure settled in. I could see clearly the transformation of the family dynamic, the removal of toxic influence, and the reinstatement of honesty and transparency. Even Julian's temporary absence was reframed in my mind as an opportunity for reflection, rehabilitation, and accountability. Nights at home returned to a peaceful rhythm, with work, reflection, and quiet enjoyment of stability. The office, once a battlefield, was now a place of calm, strategy, and personal satisfaction. I opened the drawer one last time, seeing it empty, and felt the symbolism the violation had been addressed, the tools of deceit removed, and the space reclaimed. I wrote in my notepad a single, powerful line, case closed. Family helps. Family, the weight lifted, replaced with a sense of security, clarity, and peace. The lesson was profound. Family support must be tempered with vigilance, love balanced with accountability, and protection sometimes requires firm boundaries. I'd fulfilled my role, not only as a forensic accountant, but as a guardian, protector, and orchestrator of justice within the family. The snow outside began to melt under the sun's bright gaze, signaling renewal, stability, and the return of normal life. Dinner, laughter, conversations, and the quiet joy of unburdened trust filled the house. The watch was returned, the cash accounted for, the manipulations exposed, Julian's behavior addressed, Vanessa removed, the estate and family trust secured. My parents' gratitude, deep and heartfelt, was matched by a sense of personal satisfaction, the affirmation of my skill, diligence, and moral compass. Nights ended with quiet reflection, journaling, and the satisfaction of knowing that the family finally could breathe, unthreatened by manipulation or deceit. And in that calm, I felt peace, the kind that comes from control restored, justice served, and love protected. The home, the family, and I'd survived the storm, intact and stronger. I knew that vigilance would always be necessary. But in this moment, I allowed myself to rest, to smile softly, to feel that the long, tense weeks of strategizing, investigating, and confronting had brought us back to balance. And as I closed my notebook, put away the documents, and set down the engraved pen, I felt a profound sense of resolution. The family was whole again, not perfect, but honest, aware, and safe. Julian would learn accountability. Vanessa was removed. The parents' trust was protected. And I, at last, could allow the warmth of family, the quiet of a secured home, and the satisfaction of justice well executed to settle in fully around me. The snow outside, melting, the sunlight streaming through the windows, seemed to mirror the clarity and relief I felt inside. The house was calm, the family repaired, and the future secure. I had reclaimed control, restored trust, and found peace. In the end, the chaos gave way to clarity. Family trust was restored, Julian faced the consequences, and Vanessa's manipulations were exposed. I learned that protecting those you love sometimes means being both vigilant and decisive. The house was quiet, the trust secured, and for the first time in weeks, peace settled in. Imagine finding yourself in a situation where loyalty and deception collide. How would you respond? It's a reminder that love and caution can coexist, and that truth, when revealed, brings its own justice.